Okay, it's broadcasting now. Alrighty. So sorry about that, folks. Um, so let's. We're back on, Wes.
Yeah. So where did I cut off? I think I was talking to myself for a while.
Yeah, we were too. You were. I think you were talking about Flexbox. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It was the second link in your list where we saw the prices
Yeah.
align, and we talk about the margin on the. I think you were done with that example, right?
Did you see any of this one that I'm
No,
showing?
no, that's
None
that.
of it?
No,
Okay.
sorry about that.
All right. Let me back it up. Did that whole one. Okay.
Good thing that CodePen has infinite undos, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's got to log in and do all the registration.
Okay. So can you see everything?
Yes.
Okay. So what I've got here is I'm trying to recreate this. I have a learnredux.com and I have this where it's $0.00. And it's a bit of a finicky centering because the dollar sign and the big zero, those are vertically centered. And then I've got this 00, which needs to sort of be tacked along the top of the zero. So you can imagine that this would be tough with regular floats or positioning or absolute and relative container and things like that. So I'm going to show you how I would make that with this. First of all, I want to get this thing centered in the yellow. So what I do is I take this wrapper and I'll say display flex on the wrapper itself. And what that does is allows me to say justify content center. And justify content goes across the cross axis, which is left to right. Now I want to vertically center it as well. Justify content is the main axis left to right. And if we do align items, center,
hey Wes, quick question there. Sorry. What if you use what is the benefit of using justify content center over using margin auto?
Yes, great question. So margin auto only works on one item. So if you had multiple items that you wanted to group in the center, then it wouldn't apply to multiple items. So I rarely use margin zero auto anymore.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Cool.
No problem. So I aligned item center, and it didn't seem to vertically center itself. And this is something that is sort of a catch on a lot of people. It's frustrating. And the reason is because align item is top to bottom centering by default. And if I put a background on wrapper, you'll see that how high is wrapper? It's only as high as it actually needs to be. So in order to get the vertical as well as the horizontal centering working, you need to make sure that your flex container is high enough. So what I like to do is, if I'm doing a full screen thing, is do a min height of 100 VH. And that's a viewport unit, which will stretch it across the entire height of the current viewport. And then that is perfectly centered. Now, I also want to work with these price, this price right here. And it's kind of interesting because if we look at our HTML here, the flex container is wrapper and the flex item is price. But that doesn't mean that price can also be a flex container and these spans inside of it can be flex items. So it's a pretty common thing to take your flex children and make them flex containers as well by saying display flex on that. And what's interesting about that is by default, spans are display inline. And you see that there's some natural space in between the spans, and that space is determined by the font size. But when you display flex, they all of the children are automatically flex children, and they get rid of that. I like to call it ghost space, or that inline space that goes in between each of them. Now, I want to vertically center these suckers across. So I would use the same as we did here, align item center. And that will vertically center them. And the last thing I want to do is this 95 cents. that needs to be at the top here. So what you can do is you can overwrite the align items that's set on the parent by going to one of the flex children, which in this case is sense, or the flex items, and we say align self. And that will just overwrite whatever we have put on here. So we can say align self. And what are the options? If we look at align items, you see by default it's flex, or we've centered them, but you can make them flex start, flex end, stretch, or baseline. So I'm going to say flex start. That will pop it up to the top. It seems a little bit high for me just yet. And the reason is because if we look at dollars here, and we put a background on the dollars, that's the thing in the middle, that's determining how high this entire thing is because it's the largest item in the container. Now it's a little bit high for me. So what you can do is change the line height, like 1 or something like 0.6. And what that's going to do is it's going to bump it down. You can see the red background on it, and then you've got your 95 exactly where you want it.
So that would be a little bit of a magic number kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to play around with it. And obviously you have to be aware of any text that you have underneath it as well, making sure it doesn't go under it. But if you need to bump it around, I like to play with the line height of it, or even going to the wrapper itself and putting a line height of like, I think even like 0.9 looks pretty good. And then you can kind of pick it up from there. I like that better than doing negative margins or any sort of positioning trick.
Right, that makes sense. Okay.
So any questions about that one?
No, I think we're good. Anybody has any questions?
Cool. Last one I've got here, and I'll give you these links if you'd like them after. This is like what I like to call a pricing grid here, where it's a pretty common thing. I have it on React for Beginners. This layout right here, where I've got the titles, I've got the images, and this is probably a thing that you get from designers all the time, where the copy of one of them is sometimes longer than the copy of the other one, which is fine. And Flexbox can do equal height columns. I'm not going to show you that because that's a pretty easy thing. You just display flex on the container and both of your divs will be equal height. But the tricky thing is, how do you get this to stick to the bottom without absolute positioning bottom 0 or something like that? So what I've done, and this is the case where you do have to make sure your markup is in good shape, is that I've taken each of these boxes here is a grid item. The whole thing is a grid. Each box is a grid item. And then inside of each grid item, we have 2 more divs. We've got details, which contains the text. And then it might have multiple paragraph tags. That's one thing that I like to do is if you might have multiple elements, throw a wrapper around all those elements, even if it's just one, because as soon as you add a second one, then they all become flex items. So I've got the details, and then I also have a button with the class of buy. So if we look at this, our grid item is going to be the flex container, and the details and the button are going to be our flex children. Now, if I go to my grid item here, first thing I can do is say display flex. And whoa, what happens there is that by default, your items are going to be in a row, which means that they go side by side, side by side, side by side, which is a little bit frustrating in a case like this. So what we actually want to do is change the entire axis. Right now, the main axis is left to right, and the cross axis is top to bottom. But if we change that to flex direction column, it flips everything on its head, and now everything is the direction is flipped on its head, which means that our cross axis is left to right and our main axis is top to bottom. So now if you think of the flow of the document, we're going top to bottom rather than left to right. So that's looking good. What I like to do is say dot grid item. I just want to put a border around each of the flex items. Okay, so these are my flex items, and obviously the height of these containers are defined by the tallest one. But what I can do is go back to my grid item, and we can say justify content. Now, before justify content was left to right, but because we flipped it with column, it's now top to bottom. So if we say justify content space between, which essentially means what do I do with the extra room, then they are going to snap each other to the top and to the bottom. Those buy buttons are always going to be anchored right to the actual bottom there. So I think that's my last one that I had there. I've got some advice and some challenges that I want to give to you, but really what I want to drive home here is that Flexbox is fairly large in all of the properties that you can. But at the end of the day, a lot of it just has to do with what is my axis, which is my flex direction, and how am I using those two big ones, which are justify content and align items. I think once you can nail those, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable in the space of Flexbox. So just a couple words of advice with doing Flexbox. I've been using it, and I'm lucky enough to I don't know. I think I've been using it for about 2 years now because a lot of my client work was pretty forward friendly. But the thing is, it's not a rigid grid. A lot of people are coming in with their bootstrap grid or whatever it is, and they want it to be exactly as rigid as their designs make it up. And embracing Flexbox really, maybe I'll turn my screen back on. Can I turn my webcam back on? There we go. So, where am I? Right here. It's not a rigid grid, which means that when you design your websites, you need to think about it in terms of not like 80% and 20%, and I have a budget of 100%, and they're all going to add each other up. It's more of like there's a little bit of give and take, and your designs are going to be a little bit more fluid, and that's really going to help you because I find as soon as I started using Flexbox, the amount of media queries, the amount of like dragging until it breaks, putting in a media query, fixing it, drag a little bit more, put in a media query and fix it. You know, I see a couple of you laughing because we all do this, right? You don't have to do that as much. You don't have to do that as much when you do Flexbox, but it really starts at the design stage where you need to think about, okay, what happens when there's extra room? Okay, this one's going to chomp a little bit more. What if we don't have enough room? Which one is going to give up some of its space? What's my flex basis? Are they going to wrap when there's not enough room, or are they going to start to chew into each other?
Yeah, that's true. Since I've been using Flexbox, I've used it in 2 projects. I'm using it in a 3rd one now. And I have to say that the overhead of dealing with media queries has reduced tremendously by, let's say, if I had to use before 100 media queries, now I use 15.
Yeah.
That's the proportion kind of thing. It's just magical.
Yeah, it's incredible. You don't have to think about it. I did a really flexible like sorting thing where you had icons and checkboxes, and I just had one media query for the entire thing. I was really excited about how it just works.
Yeah, it just it's like you breathe, you finish, you're like, wow, okay, I didn't deal with media queries at all or as much, and you kind of because when you have to deal with that responsive thing, it's just you go until it breaks, then you added the media query and keep going until it breaks, and then the next one, and then you change something, and then now you have another one in between, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple more points that I wanted to say here is embrace the flex is something I say a lot. Is don't think about floats. Don't think about how you used to do it with positioning and floats and media queries and all that, because I think that's the wrong. Just give away everything that you've been thinking about before and just embrace the flex. And then last thing, in words of advice, this is kind of a gotcha, is that pseudo elements are flex children or flex items. So if you have like a wrapper that has a before and after on it, those are 2 extra children. So if you have like a clear fix on a container, or you're using a framework like Foundation or Bootstrap, just make sure that if you're having some funky stuff, check if the parent has pseudo elements on it, because those are counted as children, as weird as that is.
You're right. On that note, it's sometimes when I started using Flexbox, I transitioned from using floats slowly into using Flexbox for little things within the designer build I was doing, until I eventually ditched the whole floats thing and went Flexbox. So what happened was that with floats, we have to clear them a lot.
Yeah.
So when an item is got the clear fix on it, then things are not working like Flexbox is supposed to work. So you want to check that if you're doing some clearing of some sort in your piece or your build, your element, your container, make sure you check, and it's not working, go check on that before and after clearing.
Yep. And then one last thing I wanted to say is that CSS has what's called the grid spec coming out, which is also going to help us with layout, and it also uses quite a few things from Flexbox. So Flexbox doesn't solve all of your problems. Feel free to still reach for your floats in a lot of your cases. It's not like you have to do away with floats entirely. But I think in the next year, maybe 2 years or so, when we start to see grid being implemented in the browsers, Flex and grid together are really going to help us out. But that's pretty much it. I just wanted to say, if anyone wants to take a challenge, I've got a whole bunch of exercises on flexbox.io, and you can go grab those, and I've got videos showing how to solve them.
Awesome. That's awesome, man. He said that he watched the videos and they're pretty good.
Oh, good.
He downloaded the zip files and put them on his CodePen account. So he's been active with that. Awesome. That's cool. Yeah, sure. Hold on. Here, let me. Yeah, hold on.
You want to just ask him something?
No. Let me change the. Hold on, Wes. Hold on.
Yep.
I read an article that advised against using Flexbox, like for the overall page layout. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah. I don't know if I think I agree with that. It really is case by case, but like I said, I don't use Flexbox for absolutely everything. I thought that Flexbox was going to be my like page layout, but actually what it turned out to be was that it's the little things. It's the pricing grid. It's the menu layout. It's the alignment of a photo next to text. It's all like those like little itty bitty layout things that used to be impossible. You know, when the designer gives you a Photoshop file and you're like, oh, they don't know how CSS works. They can't do that, right? It's those things that you fix.
He said, "You really are one of us."
So in other words, can you develop bad habits with Flexbox that grid should take care of? And you got to watch that then?
Yeah. I see a lot of my students do like try to like put text beside images with Flexbox and like do stuff that floats should be doing, because that's what floats are for. I don't know, that's one bad habit that I've been seeing. And then really the only other bad habit that I'm seeing is people just display Flex on everything and they don't know the other parts of it. So you really got to take some time. The CSS has never been this hard to learn. There's never been anything this tough to tackle. Maybe like animations and stuff like that were kind of tough, but like you really gotta spend some time. You gotta put in, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours learning Flexbox, and then you can start to actually use it.
So we got a question over here.
Yeah, so you mentioned how pseudo elements are counted as like child items.
Yeah.
So my question is there a way to exclude a child from a Flex display? Like maybe if you had a child that you wanted to position absolutely or something like that, can you take that out of the Flex rule?
No, unless you display none it, then it is always in there. Flex will aggressively disregard your display absolute and things like that. So yeah, it's often that where I add a couple more elements of something and then it all breaks. So you got to make sure that everything in it, you're ready for it all to be flex.
Even if you positioned it absolutely? I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
that's-
sure. I don't know. I might be wrong actually, but I don't know. I think that's a bit of a dirty road to go down, I think.
CSS table layout does that too, where it won't disregard position absolute elements in there. So there's probably on the part.
Can you hear that, Wes?
No, I didn't.
Okay, when you use CSS display table and there's a child element, but pseudo element, even if you position absolute that, it'll still take part in the layout algorithm. So
Okay.
there's precedent to look it up.
That's how it's previously worked. That's good to know.
Anybody has any more questions?
Is there still any previous Flexbox version? Any of the? There was a first iteration of it, and there was some properties, some things that weren't included in the final. Is there some troubles we would find as far as documentation that was still talking about those not used anymore?
Yeah, I don't know about documentation issues, but so for those who don't know, Flexbox was like implemented once and then they're like, this is shit, and they did it again. So what happened is that we have like two things of Flexbox. So if you want to do it in all the browsers, you need to run your code through Auto Prefixer, and that will try to like match it to the old version of what Flexbox was. But even then, I don't know, documentation is really good for Flexbox now, but there are bugs. There's a really nice GitHub repo called Flexbugs, and it's just like a list of like 30 or so. Like you thought like you had it bad with having to clear floats. It's like 10 times worse now because Flexbox does like 20 times the things. So you really have to know all the little quirks, like, oh, mobile Safari doesn't like it when you set a flex basis, or don't set a flex basis, but you set a width, then you got to like go back in and fix those things. So it's it makes our lives so much easier in a lot of cases, but it also, like anything, is brings up a lot of little annoying bugs.
Cool.
Another question. I know that I've read the CSS Tricks article before, and
Yep.
And in the article, I think it's below where they talk about flex basis. They talk about some, I don't know if they're newer properties that aren't well supported yet or something, but they talked about some of the spec that might continue to be implemented. Do you know anything about those properties?
No, that's I've never heard anything of that.
Well, you have the page up, you shoot the bot page.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it right now. I don't see anything, but there is one thing that I wish we had. And you know how we have align self flex start? We did that one where we bumped to the top. That overrides just the align items. We don't have an override for the other access on individual items if you want that. But I don't know. Do you have any information about that?
So in the flex basis section,
Yep.
there's
there's a max content, min content, fit content, and he just says like it's hard to know what these ones do. And you just kind of,
yeah, that's interesting. I've actually never come across that using it before. So maybe it will get supported. Would be kind of interesting to have it, but yeah, I don't know.
So you're going to this as your go-to. Why not MDN?
Why not MDN?
Yes.
For CSS stuff?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. Does MDN have CSS stuff on it?
That's my go-to.
I don't know. I just really like the CSS tricks, how it visual. If I need a quick reference, I always bring it up really quickly.
The thing is that with Wes, when something like that comes out, it just gets into Wes in his sleep or something. It just comes down in the air and gets into his brain.
Yeah.
Right,
No, when something like that comes out, I record a series on it so I can learn it myself.
That's true.
To say that the min and max content stuff are from the upcoming CSS box alignment module, which basically takes a lot of Flexbox's kind of magic behavior and it decomposes it into primitives you can use anywhere. They're coming out with things where you can actually say like align self-center to display block and it should work, but that's why they're not ready for prime time just yet.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that sounds really neat.
We have no question, Wes.
I went to that
Sure.
Redux.com website you mentioned, and it's
Yep.
for rescuing your phone, or you know, a business where you save for, that's just a demonstration site.
Sorry,
Is that
say
your
that
client
again?
or are you- Is that your client or are you selling stuff?
LearnRedux.com?
Redux.com.
No, learnredux.com. It's a JavaScript library for React. Yeah. What's Redux.com?
It looks like it's a website that sells waterproofing your iPhone.
Oh,
Ryan,
that's cool.
Oh, is that what?
If they sell you, don't use rice. But I have another question, that is on your videos and on your home website, wesbos.com, you've got a crown. I'm wondering what's the connection to the crown, just out of curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
It's also on your Twitter.
Yeah. I pulled the crown about 8 years ago, that little logo, and I've been putting it on everything ever since. So I thought it was cool at the time, and it's sort of stuck. There's no significance behind it.
It's a branding strategy, right, Wes?
Yeah. I mean, I like to brand things, I guess. And
Some people have astronaut helmets. You have crowns.
yes, everyone. That's that's great.
Okay, cool. Any more questions? Before, I wanted to say regarding the old Flexbox syntax. In the past, the old Flexbox syntax had performance issues. Browsers had performance issues with that syntax. So if you're auto-prefixing to support those older browsers with that legacy Flexbox syntax, just know that you may impact in performance more.
But
That doesn't happen with the
newer browsers will just ignore the old syntax, though.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, there is some stuff with Flexbox around performance, but it's not too much of a worry of mine because it's like people are like, oh, you shouldn't use it for X, Y, and Z, and I think that the browsers will just fix that because it's not really our problem.
Another thing is you hear a lot of comparison of CSS, the new grids module versus Flexbox.
Yep.
And if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Wes, the layout will be handled better with the grids.
Yep.
But elements within the grid are handled better with Flexbox.
Exactly.
Is that the right?
Exactly. And that's why we were saying earlier, like you probably don't want to lay out your entire website with Flexbox. Like maybe still stick to floats because it's so much easier. But the things inside of it, the little nitty bitty parts are going to be done really well with Flexbox.
Cool. Are you going to have something, Sean?
No, I just had a quick question, except I will just say, what I was asking was, how safe is it to use Flexbox now and don't even worry about backwards compatibility? And I watched one video a long time ago that said something about using width to make it backwards compatible, and I forget what that was about, but
yeah,
instead of
It's really cut and dry with Flexbox. If you need to support a browser that doesn't support Flexbox, don't use it at all. There's like some people are like, yeah, you could like recode it or use width and things like that, but it's a nightmare. So if you can use Flexbox, use it. If you can't, don't use it. It's a nightmare trying to support both.
Cool. Any more questions? Alrighty, man. So I think that's it for today. Thanks for coming again.
No problem.
Showing us some of your magic. We really appreciate it.
You can talk about the challenges offline.
Yeah. So what else? I guess yeah, I guess that's it, right?
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Is he going to do a React version board?
Are you going? Would you be willing to do a React CodePen for us?
Yes, at some point. I've got I'm working on an ES6 series right now, so I've been heads down in that, and but probably at some point I can come around and do another one for you. Just let me know.
Awesome. That sounds great, man.
All right.
All right, Wes. Well, thanks again for joining us. This was awesome conversation and knowledge sharing. So where can people find you, man?
I'm at wesbos.com, WESBOS.com. I'm on Twitter all day, mostly. I'm at Wes Bos on there. And yeah, pretty much around. You can check out my courses on there, and you can find more of the more in-depth stuff that I've done.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, Wes Bos. Well, take care, man. Thanks again.
You.
Until next time.
Nice to meet everyone.